Due to the unpredictability of Lexer's behavior, listener discretion is advised. The VoT Network presents the Voices of Terminus show with your hosts, Yarnilla, Lexer, and Joshua.
Enough shit running on my server.
Welcome everyone to the Voice of Terminus show. I'm your host Yanala, joined by Josh, as usual. Say hi, Josh.
Hi, Josh.
And we have Lexa with us, ranting
Get the hell off my lawn.
cursing, and being his usual self. And today's guest is Therek. Say hello, Therek.
Hello, hello.
I hope I'm pronouncing that right, by the way. And obviously the wonderful Shy in the background as usual, doing God's work, engaging the community, looking after everybody, looking after us.
Isn't that just full of himself?
Right.
Wow.
Hello. Where's my medal then? And
Hey, right, your medal. I'll show you your medal right now. We'll go back to the pre-stream.
Do I get a raise?
I'll show you the pre-stream. I don't know if everybody saw this
Well,
at the
I don't
beginning.
care about the
Look
medal.
at that beautiful image of Shy. Shy's dark mirror summoner. Isn't she beautiful?
She's a lot more colorful than the rest of us.
Hey, where's my bird? Where's my bird?
Yeah, it's not the
I opted to use the one without. I'll share that later. But anyway,
he didn't want you to outshine him.
So before
we
kick off
this
interview, something
I
serious
see how
to
it is,
talk about.
jealousy.
Something serious to talk about.
I'm a prettier mirror than he is.
Is it about my rash?
And this was brought up after a discussion I had yesterday with Minus from Pantheon Plus. He asked me honestly, if we retweet everybody, because it seems, by the looks of it, and after doing some further research on the matter, it does seem that some of the retweets and likes that we're doing for content creators have gone under. And we do retweet everybody, right? Everybody that puts content out for Pantheon does get retweeted, but we've definitely ran into some issues that were confirmed today. That everybody that puts content out there, even though I put the like on there, put the retweet on there, sometimes it doesn't follow through for whatever reason. I do not know. It's something I could confirm today, so I do apologize. We're about the community. That's what we.
I want to make one thing very clear. If I don't like it, I don't retweet. If I don't like it, I don't like it.
We push everything out, at least on the VOTs, the VOT shows Twitter feed. And I apologize to everybody that felt like we're ignoring them or anything. We're not ignoring anybody, so that's that. Secondly, our Tavern Talk has been in hiatus for so many months now, and we're still trying to figure out what kind of format we want to do, because we know Tavern Talk was there to talk about the community and talk about what was going on with VR in a more official news capacity. That's been cut short for now, so we're figuring out new ways to still promote you guys and everybody out there and talk about all the good stuff that you're doing. So we've decided to push out a weekly picture format kind of thing, a little article where we address what's been happening in the prior week within the community, and obviously from VR, and what's going to be coming up in the week to come. So Josh, do you want to quickly inform everybody?
Yeah, so basically on the 13th of October, the topic on how Pantheon MMO plans to deal with the open world content. And then on the 17th of October, there was the topic on development progress with Minus and Baggage as this week's co-host. And finally, on October the 18th, there was the topic of part 3 and concluding the series talking about loot.
Yep, so those were the 3 videos that were most recent from Nathan Napalm, Pantheon Plus, and Basgrim. So let's go have a look at what's going to be happening in the coming week. So next week, we all saw it. VR put out a tweet that they are going to be doing a new format of their newsletter, and that starts Wednesday the 23rd at 6 p.m. Pacific Daytime is when that stream will go live, where they'll be talking about the innate, the racial innates, the Spriggan will be talked about again, and there will be following with the second part of Burning Questions. That will be a bi-weekly show. And then next Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, correct me if I'm wrong, Lex, Eastern Time is when Minus does his show?
Yes, Thursdays.
Yes, Thursdays at 9.
I just want to make one request.
Yeah.
If we do a show dealing with the Pantheon's burning questions, can we call it Burning Sensations?
So that
That's exactly what I was thinking about as well.
So that will be next Thursday. He'll be joined by Micah Does Stuff to talk about this new format. So it should be an interesting show. So check it out. So without further ado, let's get into the interview, shall we? And talk to this wonderful person we have joining us today, Therek. Hello and welcome again.
Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. You guys are really exciting.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So let's jump straight into it, Therek. Tell us about your background in gaming.
Well, so I grew up in like the late 80s, early 90s, which was sort of the golden age of PC adventure games. So I was like, my roots are in the Sierra and LucasArts and all the graphic adventures.
Yeah,
exactly. Like, they're so good, right?
Good, so good.
I cried a little bit when Sierra went under.
Same.
It was a slow, painful death for a lot of years, but
very sad.
I keep the flame alive. I've got a collection of big box games that I hold very dear and near to my heart. So
I lost all mine.
Oh, I did. I had to rebuild my collection. But that's a long story. But yeah, no. So I grew up with those games, and from there I've always been an RPG player. So I play like the big RPGs like Ultima, and I've got like the gold box games, like the old like the AD&D adaptations by SSI were really good.
Those were brilliant. I loved them.
Yeah, and I was like, excellent. I like the Dragonlance novels too. So they did
me too.
Novels as well as the Forgotten Realm stuff. So
that was so good.
I know they're hard to go back to, but they were good at the time. So yeah, I love big RPGs. That's sort of my my bread and butter in terms of my genre of choice, I guess.
Yeah.
So from there, and then moving on, and then I was in university in 1998. And I was away from home and like away from friends and family and all that stuff. And that's when 1999 came along. And of course, that's EverQuest, right? So EverQuest came along at the perfect time for me in terms of just where I was at in my life. And that's when I started playing EverQuest right at the start. And played that for like 3-4 years. Got back home and then sort of fell away from it a little bit. Sort of had life stuff. And then got back into the MMO space when Vanguard came out, and and then played that for a couple of years. So that's sort of a long road from the early to mid 90s to the early 2000s, I guess, or late 2000s. And since then, I've been sort of out of the MMO space since Vanguard sort of died. The most
kind of like most people.
Yeah,
right. With a bit of a break, yeah.
Yeah. It was, sad to see it go, but again, you can go back to it, but I haven't. So, most recently, I actually, I was never a big player of like CCGs, like Magic the Gathering or anything like that. But I got into Hearthstone in about 2015, and I really got into it, and I played it quite a bit. So the last 4 or 5 years have been pretty consumed with Hearthstone stuff, and then I dropped it. I dropped it. Earlier this year when I was just sort of done with it. But I still play the big RPGs too. I still like, Skyrim, and right now I'm playing Pillars of Eternity too. I mean, it's a long road, but that's sort of the roots of things and where I go.
It's a nice rich history you've got there.
Yeah. So really looking forward to Pantheon, obviously.
Good. So what has been your best and worst moments in an MMO?
Well, it's one that I think a lot of people have cited as their best moment, and it's a pretty simple thing. When I started playing EverQuest, I remember my buddy sort of sold me on it. He wasn't really much of a high fantasy type genre guy. He more was into Star Wars and sci-fi and that kind of stuff. So I always had to drag him into the fantasy games like that. But he got EverQuest before I did, and so he sort of sold me on it. And he says, like, this game, you won't believe it. It's different from anything we've done before, right? And he's like, you're there with everybody, and when you use your skills, they get better as you use them. And it was all these new sort of conventions that nobody had seen before. And so we were out, we started playing the game together, and in the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it was at the time, he's like, okay, we got to go from, and I started in Kinos, right? That was where my ranger started. And he's like, okay, we got to go over to Freeport. And he's like, okay, it's going to be hard though, because, it's just the two of us. We don't have the best stuff. And he's like, it's a difficult run. And I'm like, oh, how hard can it be? Right. And so sure enough, we make the journey from Kinos over to Freeport. And, honestly, I look back on it, and it's like, it's nothing that you would achieve or like aim for in a game these days, but it was such an accomplishment at the time, just because of the things you had to do, right? You had to avoid all those skeletons in Kithakor Forest. You had to run, there was griffins, there was giants you had to dodge. I remember once you got to the common lands, right, you had to hug the wall and run along the wall to try and see all the dangerous stuff. And honestly, it's a simple thing, but I think that's probably one of my favorite moments in MMOs. And the other one I thought of is sort of, it's a good moment, but it's also a bad moment. It was a scary moment, I guess is a better way to describe it. But I was doing my epic quest for my ranger, and part of that involved, there was like a 48-hour camp in, I don't remember which zone, but Veneral Sathir was the boss you had to beat to drop, I think it was like a sphere or an orb or something, right? So my friend and I decided we'd take shifts on this 48-hour camp, and we did. And we had a guild, with us too, to sort of support us, drop in and help out when the pop came that we were going to need help killing him. And so we sat there for 48 hours and we took shifts. I would sleep, and then she'd be on, and then, she'd go to bed, and I'd stay on for the next 8 hours, whatever. And then finally, he pops, right? So it's a big deal. So we call the guild. We're like, okay, get in here. He's here. Let's do this. We do it. Kill him. I kneel down. You know how it is in EverQuest, right? You kneel down when you loot a corpse. I see the orb, and next thing, it's the disconnected screen, right? So, oh my God, I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. I saw my whole, EverQuest life flash before my eyes in that moment. And I'm like, this is not happening right now. So I'm panicking, and, I know they're freaking out. So I'm logging back in, desperately going back in. I get back in, I'm still down on one knee, but the loot window's closed. And I'm like, I opened my inventory, and it was there. And I was like, I told her, I'm like, yeah, I got it. It's all good. And that it was one of those moments that was so terrifying. I look back on it now, and I'm like, I couldn't do that today, but it was a good time. Like, it was a 48 hours of sitting there, and when we were not, when we were together and talking, like, we were joking around, we were having fun. It went by actually pretty quickly. And at the end of the thing, it was this epic moment for this epic sort of quest, right? So, yeah, that was a pretty big one.
We've all had those fears. You get disconnected, the loot window's open, you get disconnected, and it's like, oh my God!
There was a lot more cursing with some than others, but...
I think I was in my apartment at the time, and I think my neighbors probably heard me, like, oh my God, no!
Somebody's getting murdered next door, call the cops.
Like, that guy hasn't left his apartment in 2 days. Something's going on in there.
It's just EverQuest, officer. I promise.
That's what you like.
Explain that, right?
Well, when I used to tell people that I played like EverQuest, and I would, I obviously had an addiction. I wouldn't leave my apartment for 2-3 days, and then people were like, just playing a stupid video game. I was like, hey, could be cooking meth. Perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm not hurting anybody. I'm just sitting here in front of my screen for 2 days. All right, go away.
Hey, I was better than some of my friends who were doing the same thing, but I was showering.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, me too.
But you seem like a guy who's been around for a while. You've pretty much seen it all.
Yeah, I feel like
I'm curious. Yeah, I hear you. So, what's your take on the MMO genre today? I mean, there's a lot of people out there that really do feel disenfranchised, and I'm kind of curious if you might be one of them as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think disenfranchised is a really good way of putting it, because when I play modern MMOs, I feel like an outsider. Like, I feel like it's not just a factor of, getting older. Like, it being, once you get to 40, you're sort of like, you realize that most of the gamers or most of the people playing MMOs, at least modern MMOs, are younger folks, and that's fine. And that's not why you feel like an outsider. It's about the game design, right? It's not designed in a way so, like, we've been sort of robbed of what made MMOs great, So community,
Preach it.
Your cooperation, challenge, right? I mean, I sound like a friggin' VR commercial right now, but there's the reason. That's the reason that their slogan has worked and brought people in, because disenfranchisement is exactly what has happened. We started playing Ultima Online and EverQuest, and we were sort of like raised in that environment, and now it's like everything has changed. So I do feel like it's like an outsider. I saw somebody actually the other day, they had a really good comment. They were talking about why MMO like EverQuest is so memorable for so many people. And it was because they said it was because it was a shared traumatic experience. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of what it was, like people bond, and people do, you get weird sort of bonds and strong connections when you go through really difficult times. And show me an MMO that's super difficult these days. I mean, I know that there's probably one or two out there, but I really don't think that they're as prevalent, or I don't think that they're the most popular ones. Certainly aren't that.
The biggest thing as well, difficulty is seen by people in various
it's very
ways.
Very much a perspective thing too.
What is challenging? What is difficult? The terminology is so different in so many ways. It's hard to explain, and it's
not only that though. It's also about, is it boring? Is it challenging because it's boring and takes long to do, but not really that hard, or is it actually difficult and actually needs some sort of mental challenge to get it done?
But another thing you said as well, being like of an older generation, isn't it cool though? When you're hanging out with these people in these MMOs, and they're like, they're still going to school and college. It's like, you turn around and say, hey, it's time for your bedtime, mate. Off you go. Let the big boys play now.
I mean, to be honest, I think probably my bedtime is sooner these days than theirs.
Yeah, tell me about it, man.
I'm like 10 o'clock. I'm like, no, I'm done. I'll see you guys later. Yeah, I think that's a good point, though. I mean, challenge and there's definitely a difference between what's challenging and what's just inconvenient, right? Or just gets in the way, right? Those are two different things.
That's the most thing that happens, right? It's an inconvenience difficulty level that is impacted in most of these current MMOs out there.
Right.
Right? And it's hard to get into a discussion for somebody that enjoys that game and finds it difficult, and then you try and engage with a discussion with them. It's really hard to kind of have a civil discussion, because they take what you're saying completely as a negative, where it's not it's not meant as a negative. But for us older gamers now, the EQ generation, and being over their mid-30s going on to the 40s and everything plus, and we've grew up where the old adventure games, the mouse point and click games, where they were really tough to do, and then you got your MMOs like EverQuest and Ultima Online and Dark Age of Camelot, where it was a challenge. It wasn't an artificial challenge, and that's the difference. Most of these games have adopted an artificial way to bring challenge into the game, like Josh mentioned. Slow pace grind to get your levels. It's that's what people see as difficult and challenging. It's not difficult and challenging. It's tedious, because it's an artificial. You can feel the artificial flow of, you have to grind to get to the next level. But the encounters themselves and going about it is just it's like slicing meat.
Spending my time is not difficult. I can spend time very easily, right?
Yeah.
It's more about, I always think about when, doing plane breaks in EverQuest, when you had to break into Plane of Fear and Plane of Hate, right? That was hard. And it wasn't just a time sink. It took time to organize, but that's a different kind of thing where, what was going on there was this massive sort of like tactical approach to how you're going to overcome a challenge.
Yeah.
And you going back again to the Sierra games, those were super difficult too. They were difficult and they were punishing, and you died for not thinking about the situation properly, and people always rag on the old Sierra games and say, well, you died every 5 seconds. Well, yeah, you did, if you weren't sort of in the moment thinking about how am I going to solve this puzzle that's in front of you, right?
Wasn't Dragon's Lair one of the Sierra games as well?
No.
I don't believe so.
That's a prime example as well, where you had to you had to move left or right with your mouse. And it was like that it was like a storytelling kind of way you go about it,
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things that you look back on and you think, where is this nowadays?
So yes, definitely I do feel disenfranchised from the current MMOs, and I've tried to go back. I've dipped my toes. Like more so than that, but like a tourist, I would say, in Elder Scrolls Online. I've played Guild Wars 1 and 2, and they have their strengths, but it's certainly not. It's a different game. It's not. I don't think of them as MMOs. I think of them as something else.
And that's a good point. Go on, Lex.
What's funny is I was having a conversation with one of my old guildies from another game, and he was talking about how EverQuest might have been a difficult game because it was the first of its breed, and a lot of things were just done not the best, and we just dealt with it. And because he's like, these 48-hour camps or these three-day camps or whatever, it's like those weren't difficult. I'm like, those were a mental challenge.
Yeah.
You had to convince yourself to keep going.
Yeah.
You had to keep your own morale up.
That's right.
And while I'm not a fan of those long ass camps because they just drive me nuts, it's more so these days because I just don't have the time to do them.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's like, even if I had the will to push forward to do this, I couldn't do it anyway.
And that's
because I've got 6 I've got 6 calls I got to deal with today.
And that's the thing that people, us gamers, we don't realize. There's generations between all these games, right? Ultima Online and EverQuest were the first, the first in this area. And back in 1999, those games were challenging. They were difficult. They were intriguing. They were, it was like crack for you, because it was like Lex said, it was the first of its kind, and they all hold value. Now, if people go back and look at EverQuest, they go, this game isn't hard at all. This game's boring. This game doesn't offer me anything that I'm currently interested in, or doesn't, it's nothing new. Of course, it's nothing new. It was the first of its kind. And
exactly. And you had to play with what you had in those days.
Yeah, exactly. Developers had, tight resources, and the technology wasn't available to us like it is today. And the problem is, the gaming industry itself is at a stalemate, right? They're stuck smack in the middle, and it's been a constant rinse and repeat going forward with every MMO, adding some twists to some of the mechanics that are already available, but there's nothing groundbreaking anymore. The way character development's done, or the NPCs react, or the world, how you engage the world, nothing has changed there. It's all the same, and that's why
it's also easier to fall into the trap of, well, not so much a trap, but getting stuck in your own business logic of it's better to make things like Legos, like super easy, rather than to get intricate, like the builder kits, and just sell more. It's very easy to get stuck into that.
Yeah.
It's hard to be brave,
And it does take companies, that want to spice it up. But I want to quickly touch on what you said, Therek, though. Every game, though, in itself, has valuable systems, valuable approaches, valuable ideas. They're not all bad. The games themselves might not be enjoyable, but there's some concepts in there that if you look at these concepts from a neutral viewpoint, they do hold some value on the approach that they were trying to take, or the approach that they're taking. They might not quite be at where they need to be with this, but it's a good start. And it takes
like Guild Wars 2, for example, they're dynamic events.
Mm-hmm.
It was in the right direction. It was a good start. They just never went far enough with it.
No.
That's a really good point. Those dynamic events in Guild Wars 2 were really a neat thing, and one of the things that actually drew me to play that game was sort of that idea. These world sort of events, and I totally agree. I mean, there were some good things, but again, there's other games I like too that are not MMOs, and that's sort of what that ends up falling into, so it's the single playerization of MMOs is just keeps getting more and more, where it's just getting so far away from cooperative and working in groups and doing things that require community and challenge and working together, and it's just hard to be bold for a developer, for a designer to be bold.
You know what I just came to my head. Modern MMOs are all about giving everyone a participation trophy.
On top of it though, it's kind of insulting because they're milking a cow. They're like, hey, guess what? It's like they found a middle ground. We can get people to play our MMO, be a single player, feel the accomplishment. Everybody gets a trophy, everybody's a hero, and we can charge them on top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I know they've really nailed the psychology of it as all very sort of scary when you look at it, and those the quick dopamine hits that you get for every little thing, and it's a tough thing to overcome, especially for us as the consumers, as the gamers, to say no, I don't want that. Right? We're sort of primed for that. So, but I think there's a line where you get to a point where that doesn't work on you anymore.
And it comes, and it's good that these companies now that are coming out, Pantheon with Visionary Ones, with Pantheon coming out with what they want to do, even SOE Daybreak with Landmark, for instance, and EQ Next, that was revolutionary, the tech, right? And the bold approach. And then having not having shards where you're locked to one server. You can literally jump from one server to the other. It doesn't matter if it would be an EU server or a US server or whatever. You could jump around these islands and visit, the different shards, and visit people's buildings and go and explore in their world and have different things happen there. It takes these type of companies to always remind the game developers in general that, hey, we need to push for expanding on it. Things have to evolve.
But it's becoming increasingly more rare to find development companies out there that do it for the sake of the fans and for just the sake of the love of developing something that is going to be worthwhile. There was a study that I saw on YouTube the one time where they actually have all these developers together, and they're saying, well, we've done studies on dopamine hits on the fans, when we offer them X and Y, we can then offer them Z within a certain period of time, because we know most of them will try and buy that type of thing. And it's increasingly heading down those roads. And to find companies that just do what they do.
The thing is though, Josh, we're to blame as players, as consumers, as customers, because we allow them to do it, because we're so addicted to these games and we're so passionate about these games. And when they do something wrong, it's like EverQuest 2, for instance. I played that exclusively for 12 years.
Yeah.
And the first 8 years were brilliant. Then everything started to kind of shift into the disenfranchised movement for me as well. And then I still paid money and still got their expansions and still played the game. And that's the problem. We have to also take a lot of the blame for what the game companies are doing, because at the end of the day, they're there to make money. And as long as we are willing to throw money at them, it doesn't matter how disenfranchised we are and how annoyed we are, stop playing the game.
Yeah.
Don't moan about the game. Stop playing it, and then something can happen, maybe. If they realise that all of a sudden everybody's stopping to play, stops playing their games, then maybe there might be a shift, because we have to also take a lot of the blame for this.
I just feel very sorry for gamers that are now coming into these MMOs that are currently going forward, because they never would have experienced the EverQuest and EverQuest 2 times that we experienced.
Yeah.
So they are really going to miss out on those golden ages. Well, we had, at least we experienced them.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. We were on that question for a long time.
It's always a good one, though.
Big question.
It always is. It's a very hot topic for a lot of people. But moving on, would you mind sharing where in the world you are from?
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm proud Canadian.
So sorry.
Hey, I live in Winnipeg, which is sort of smack dab right in the middle of North America there. So, and also sort of right in the middle of Canada. But I'm from Calgary originally, which is out closer to the mountains. And my wife is from here, so that's why I'm here. So
awesome.
I'm in Winnipeg, the winter capital of Canada.
Very nice.
I grew up on the East Coast.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's the one place I haven't been, actually. I've been everywhere in Canada except out to the Maritimes and out to the East Coast.
That's why you sound sane, actually. Now that I think about it.
That's why I maintain my good, happy disposition, maybe. I don't know.
I've actually been to every province.
Yeah.
Even after the extra room was added.
So
I had to go back just because.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Good. I haven't been to the Nunavut. I've been to Yukon Territory. I haven't been to Nunavut.
See, I try not even to say that name because half the people, actually 99% of the people watching would be like, did he just swear in another language?
Yeah. I've lost half the people, yeah.
Let's get into Pantheon, shall we? Let's go and start talking a bit about Pantheon a bit. That's what we're all here for.
Only an hour in, we're good.
Yep. Yeah. Almost an hour in, yeah. 36 minutes actually, so we're still good. Plus we started late, so after discovering Pantheon and reading up about it, what were your thoughts on it?
Well, so I pledged to the Kickstarter back in 2014. That didn't work out. I decided I'd basically step away, let the angel investors that they were seeking sort of find them or let them find them. They did. I came back later, and that's really so. I really started to pay attention really closely earlier this year. I was not paying all that much attention, and so when I started paying attention again, and I saw like the progress that had been made, I really made a conscious decision that this was what I was going to focus on. And then I did my pledge. So I have an advisor's pledge, but for me, it was even more important for me, or a harder decision was where to spend my attention rather than my money. Right. So it's like I've committed to following the game and following pretty closely in terms of where they're at in the game's development. I feel strongly about it. And the one thing that I really sort of understood when I made that commitment was that this is a game that's going to need a strong community to function or to be successful, and so I'm going to do everything I can to try and make that happen, right? And so I'm not a content creator, I'm not a streamer, nothing like that, but I'll try to participate in every sort of community-based activity that I can. So and it's pretty simple. That those are my thoughts, I guess, about what inspires me about Pantheon, I guess.
Cool.
Yeah. So,
what makes the difference between Pantheon and all the other MMOs that has you excited for it?
I think it's the game tenets. Again, going back to the other question, that's sort of also what drew me in. When you read those game tenets, I know that they're the website's outdated a bit, but those game tenets I think are still what they're functioning, where their vision is coming from, and they talked about challenge, they talked about community, they talked about identity, about your character's identity being important, and there aren't any other MMOs out there that are putting those sort of principles out there as being their guiding vision. So, and we covered a lot of the other things that differentiate it from the other MMOs that are out there, and we did our previous question there, but I think that they were good to put that stuff right out front and say, look, this is the game we're making. Here's our vision. Yeah. And that's what we're doing. And I want them to stick to that. I want them to follow that. So cool. That gets me excited for Pantheon.
So you mentioned basically you followed them in Kickstarter, or you backed them in Kickstarter. So what was that? So what was the moment, the actual thing that made you want to go and support this project from Kickstarter onward?
Probably, and I'm gonna take the probably what everybody says here, but Brad McQuaid. Everybody knows who Brad McQuaid is. Everybody knows EverQuest. He was the guy, and people have followed his career, I think, over time, and I think they see in him what. They see the vision. He's a guy who's obviously driven by a vision for what he wants, and I think that comes across. Sometimes better than others, but he's somebody that inspires people, I think. So his name being attached to it, it drew me in and sort of made me believe. But also just the approach that they were going to take with a small focused team, and the business model as well is what another thing that was attractive to me, the pure sub model. We can talk about that, with the other games out there being all, cash shops and microtransactions and all that nonsense. So it was the pure, the purity of it, I guess.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yep. My starstruck.
He's a superstar in the MMO, world, right? So everybody knows who Brad McQuaid is. So.
Yeah. Moving on to Pantheon races, everybody gets excited to choose what race they're going to be, and especially the classes as well. So, which of the races in Pantheon has caught your eye the most?
I'm going to say the gnomes because they're so different from the traditional gnome. So I never played a gnome in any other MMO. I don't know. It just doesn't fit with my sort of my character, I guess. The small, befuddled, silly tinkerer sort of trope, wasn't my thing at all. So I just sort of never played them. But the way that Pantheon's got it set up for the gnomes being sort of a pretty serious, deviation from that. They have this really sort of serious disposition. The story behind how they became what they are is really interesting to me. It was so interesting that I actually started to, come up with like after reading the lore, I started to come up with sort of, my own stories, and I'm like, well, I'm probably going to create a character with a backstory just because I find this lore so interesting. So how they lost their physical sort of bodies. Yeah,
it's one of those things where you look at the gnomes and they found a way to become a higher existence, to not rely on fluids in their body, this, that, and the other. So it also begs the question, are they the most intelligent race and most powerful race that is currently residing on Terminus as well? Because they're not bound to skin and bone and this and that. So it is a very interesting approach that they've taken with the gnomes for sure.
And we might, who knows, maybe this next week coming up with them talking about racial innates, maybe that'll be something that it comes into play, right? Because you would think as a non-physical sort of entity, they might have more resistances to some sort of physical damage or something like that. Who knows?
What's up, Mike?
Well, the thing is, though, you can just hit the off-on switch behind the back of their heads and that's then gone. So there's their weakness immediately.
No innate trait. Can power flashlight.
Exactly. E.T. phone gnome. Somebody's going to name their gnome E.T. I'm telling you.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna play a gnome enchanter. I mean, I think that they're super interesting as long as they're not like like you say, solar powered or you have an on-off switch. Then you're in trouble. But
it depends. It depends if the weather's going to play a part. It's cloudy. Oh. He's got less endurance. He can't recover that well. He's going to be out of battery power.
As long as these gnomes didn't come from the disgruntled wife's sock drawer, we're good.
I can't wait now. I just can't wait now to get into this game and do some videos on the gnomes and just take the mick with having bad weather and when it's a bad
God.
day, and when it's raining, electrocution and.
No. Here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna do one of those like machinima things where you actually have a story and you have your gnome character junk. One of the things, he's gonna get an idea, and this like unlit light bulb is gonna pop up over his head, and he's gonna look up and he's gonna touch it, and it's gonna go bing.
and his whole body will be sucked up into that light bulb, and there it all sits.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's so much potential there. So I don't know. They caught my eye when I first started looking into it. I like the elves too. I have to say, they're more serious. Like it's more of like a standard, typical elf as you would expect. But I also enjoy their sort of societal structure, and I like the whole story of the Lucent Tree is really cool to me. So that'll probably be my main character. Will probably be an elf ranger, in fact. So
see, that's very interesting to me, because a lot of the people that I've talked to, they actually are not. They're usually like high elves or wood elves or whatever whatever. They're actually not super stoked about the elves in Pantheon, because they're not your generic Tolkien-esque elf.
Yeah, they're not arrogant, and we're better than everybody. They're more down to earth. They're more fragile than your typical elf.
That's true. Yeah. They don't fit into that sort of haughty, pompous elf stereotype, which is kind of cool. And we keep getting more information about them too, right? Like there was the Ember elves, there was the Ashen or the Lucent elves, the Ashen elves, and now we've got the Torn elves. There's one more, I think, too. I don't remember, but the whole culture and the whole sort of everything revolves around this giant tree. And I was talking to somebody the other day and just saying, I want to get into the game and see this giant tree. Like, and
the thing is,
it must be pretty cool,
And the thing is as well, what people don't realize is their planet got blown up or destroyed, or they had to flee and everything. That goes for all the races there. So it's kind of like they had to start anew. Right, they're not the elves that they were on their planet. It was completely different back, on their home world. The same goes for any race out there. So it's kind of like they're having to rebuild their civilization. Obviously with the events that happen on their planet and what brought them to Terminus. Also plays an effect, so they're trying to basically be cautious not to make the same mistakes again, and also trying to figure out what's going on in this world. Why the hell are we here? And that goes for all the races out there. So it's something where VR has a lot of room, a ton of room, to still build on it and bring in your typical wood elf and your high elf and your dark elf and your whatever.
To me, that's kind of like, if the lore actually progresses rather than just slapping expansions on, then having the elves split into stuff like that, if that's what the community's kind of wanting, would, as long as you you preface that with some interesting events that are possibly GM driven, it could be pretty interesting, I think.
I think so as well.
Not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying it's kind of a cool thought process.
Yeah, there's a lot of room for storytelling, and I love that, right? There's actually, I don't know if you guys, go on the official forums and look at the fan fiction stuff, but there's some pretty awesome fan fiction when it comes to there's one particularly about the elves when they left their home planet that I just love. Like, it's so good. So, and again, so it's inspired me to sort of write, backstories or tales about, gnomes and things like that.
Cool.
Nice. Yeah. So, which of the races do you dislike the most?
Well, I don't really dislike any of them. I don't get the Scar necessarily, but that's, again, my personal taste is I don't usually play evil races. I just don't identify with them necessarily. And
they're just misunderstood, buddy.
Yeah. Well, when you eat your own people, you are a little misunderstood, I have to say. But so they're just, I don't know what they are. Like, they're chaotic, or they're
survival of the fittest, baby.
Yeah,
the Darwinist.
Yeah, the ultimate Darwinists. Yeah, so they're working towards generations of the greatest Scar will come around eventually, I guess. So.
Exactly, they could be
that could possibly be the case.
Think of like an entire race that is essentially a mercenary army, driven and whipped and abused and basically just thrown at enemies, finally getting a taste of freedom, and then all of a sudden now they're on Terminus.
Yeah,
and Go on, Therek.
No, I was just going to say that's a cool idea. That there is some fertile ground there for some interesting storytelling, definitely.
Yeah, so I've just had a one of those moments again. So what if later on we discover that even though they fight each other and eat each other and this and that, they're cannibals amongst each other. Maybe somewhere in their lore that we don't know about. Maybe back in the day it was foretold. It's been lost, this information. But by eating their own kind, they kind of gain the memories, the strength, the everything from that other scar. And that basically empowers them even more. Maybe that's a thing. That's why they're eating each other up, because it's out of respect. It's like with the Klingons, when they fight. Think of it like that. Who knows?
I can just picture a Scar with like a freaking femur hanging out of his mouth there. I respect you so much right now.
See, that's what I love about doing these player Q&As and just theorizing and speculating. It just sparks the greatest, craziest, dumbest ideas. And
I swear to God, we need somebody who can make comic strips, because I got 1,000 ideas.
Yeah, we're definitely looking for somebody out there who can.
I couldn't draw a stick figure to save my life.
There is somebody who did a really good Pantheon comic in the fan creations. It's either in fan fiction or fan creations on forums there, and it's pretty impressive actually. Mm-hmm. So I love that stuff though. Yeah. So the scar are kind of crazy. But I don't, again, evil race is not my thing, but I do like the Dark Mirror. Their story is pretty cool, and I could see myself sort of trying that out. But so I don't dislike any of them. I just some more than others, right?
Somewhat confused. Yes.
So let's go and have a look at classes.
Yeah.
So you've already talked about Ranger and everything. So what typically draws you to them though? What was your choice for? What made your choices for these classes that you typically are drawn to?
So I always play a Ranger. That's always my main. And I think it's one of those, living vicariously through skills I don't actually have. Because Rangers have a lot of skills that you could actually really have in the real world, right? Yeah. It's not all about magic and crazy combat skills. It's more about foraging and tracking and survival skills. And these are things you could actually do. And these are none of the things that I have in real life. So I sort of look at it like, well, I can do these things in this world, so I'll do them. So from a non-combat or non fighting stance, that those are the things I like about the Rangers. But from a combat stance, from a utility perspective, that's what I like. I like being able to do multiple things differently. In EQ, that was sort of the Rangers' downfall a little bit. They didn't do really anything all that well. You could get some really high DPS if you were totally had the best stuff or whatever, but I like to be able to mix it up. And one of the things in the class descriptions is the momentum. And I know they've said that they're making some changes to that or whatever, but the momentum mechanic with Rangers moving in and out of combat, going from melee to ranged, giving you, building up a momentum, a resource of some sort that allows you to use your abilities was really cool to me.
Yeah, it definitely sounds very intriguing. It's like one of those moments where you backstab the encounter with a dagger, and then you do like a backflip, and then you got that momentum built up, and you can then use your bow or your crossbow or whatever weapon you've got to do a range shot. It's very interesting. Or you take a range shot. He's now basically stifled. He's disoriented. You've built up some momentum. Now you can go in and make a blowing melee strike. So it's definitely really a really cool concept to see how that dynamic is going to work. And obviously, another thing that comes to it as well, the visuals. Are we going to actually see this momentum, these visuals on these kind of situations where you have things like this happening? So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like just the ability to be creative with your skills. So I usually also have another character. I usually play an enchanter or some sort of crowd control as my second, my alt or whatever. So because I find that there's always different things to do. I don't feel drawn to classes where tanks or healers, and I know a lot of people love those classes and and that's great because it frees up the space for me not to do those things, because I'm just not. I find myself getting maybe not bored, but just not that interesting of a role for me. So not to bash on healers or tanks, we need them and love them, but for me it's about combat utility or magical utility support sort of role.
See what now as a career tank, what I'm hearing is you're one of the players that really enjoys controlling the flow of a fight.
Yes. Yeah, I like to
rather than being the stone wall or the person that keeps the stone wall alive.
Exactly. And so in EverQuest, I often offered to pull when we didn't have a better puller, like a monk or something. So I loved it though, because I found it super challenging, because Rangers, we didn't have the same pulling abilities, so I'd have to snare and then root something if something else came along. I often, we get multiple pulls as Rangers, we can't control that, but so if I had to snare one, root one, and then sort of work around to keep them under control while everybody was doing their thing, that was fun for me.
So let's go and deviate real quick. Rangers, though, in general, doesn't matter what MMO it is, they got this sort of reputation, right? Of being, the downfall of the group, being, the ones to blame when something goes wrong. What do you got to say about that?
We die a lot. So what I say to that is that we take it for the team.
If you don't die, it means you're not trying hard enough.
Right. Yeah. So as long as people understand that, there's gonna be, I know Rangers do have a weird reputation, and I don't mind that. It's fine. It's kind of fun to sort of try and overcome that. You go into a group and you're like,
but
why do we have to get it? Is there anybody else available? Why do we have to get this Rangers? Or somebody else we can pick up?
The thing is though, with Rangers, right? Most of these games weren't designed to handle how a Ranger is meant to be played, right? With your longbow or your short bow, and I mean, EverQuest 2 is a great example of this as well. The Rangers had a hard time in that game because the space you had available to use your abilities and everything wasn't accounted for that particular class. When you've got a class that is just focused on range DPS or focused on melee DPS, and then you have a class like the Ranger that can do a bit of both, it's something that it looks like game developers didn't take that into consideration a lot, how that is going to affect that class, and that's why he died a lot. But like you said earlier on, the Ranger itself, it's one of the greatest classes you could possibly have. He can track, he can set traps, he's a survivalist, he can read maps and indications and all kind. It's the guy you want in your group. Yeah.
Oh, hey, I like to hear that. that's what I want to hear in Pantheon. So, I like that. Yeah.
Let's go and have a look at. So, in regards to the Ranger, we've seen some of the abilities that they have. They've released, the information on some of the abilities that they have, right? So, from what we know, which one has you excited the most from the abilities for the Ranger?
Yeah, if you look at them, look at the abilities, they're actually pretty, there's a lot of similarity to the EQ Ranger. And again, going back to that, so they have tracking, they have a snare type effect. So I'm glad that's in there. The thing with tracking that I love so much is, people coming up and saying, I'm looking for this mob, can you tell me if he's popped right now, if he's spawned right now? And as a Ranger, it was always fun. You're like this compass. You got it up, and if you're running around the zone and you can see, it's 500 to the northwest or whatever, however they did it. It was so, I enjoyed doing that. I don't know why. But I'm glad that those have been brought in to the Ranger and Pantheon. I mean, a lot of their combat skills are pretty cool too. But again, I know that they're changing how momentum works, and I think that I like you were saying, Yarn, is that it's hard to design for Ranger skills, right? It's hard to design around an encounter that utilizes. So if you're in a tight dungeon, and they need to move out of into ranged range and move out of melee range, how do you do that in a tight dungeon space, right? I think they sort of have realized, man, I'm just speculating, but I think they've sort of realized that that's really hard to design for, and to accommodate and make the Ranger have utility and be effective in all situations. So but when you talk about the other stuff, the tracking, the snare, those are the fun ones.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So let's move on to a little bit of lore.
For sure.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being you really couldn't care any less about it, 10 being, oh god, I gotta have more, it must be inside of me. How important is lore to you in a game?
Are you referencing the druid seed?
No, I'm not.
Again?
I'm referencing to the ranger telling people if they've got it up.
I can get my
Oh,
seed.
God. Well, that's what. Okay, now I see why you're laughing. Okay, I didn't understand. Now I see. It was some weird wording.
Sorry, I reverted back to my 12-year-old self.
No, I love the lore. We talked about this on Minus's show not too long ago, and I moved the meter all the way up to the top, and it's extremely important for me. It's a PvE game, and when you have an environment, you better care about the environment. Or for me, I need to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. I need to have a reason, or you know, a reason to either, whether it's even exploring or taking it down this sort of, lore heavy boss that you know a lot about. That's cool to me. And I love good stories. I'm a big reader. I read a lot. I love creativity in writing. And when you combine a really good, detailed, well-written story with this virtual fantasy world to adventure in, it's pretty incredible. For me, I can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
So you've got so many generic lore crap games out there these days that are just like the Mad Libs of lore, right? They just fill in the blanks with random stuff. The lore for Pantheon is ridiculous. It's so good in my mind.
And you mentioned the environment as well. Now, that's one of the things that I think has been really missing from these MMOs. They all talk about being PvE and offering player versus environment content, but it isn't so much so. You're fighting NPCs. You've got these worlds that have different feels and looks to them, but the environment isn't really engaging with you as a player. And I really hope that VR bring that there. So say you're in this zone that's scorching and toxic and everything. I would like to see like dust clouds come along that have a very toxic environment that can be harmful to us as a group, and it's like it's dynamic. It's something that is constantly moving, so it's affected by the climate itself, the weather. So we actually feel like we're fighting against the environment, we're fighting against these NPCs. So it's an added challenge to us as well. It's not just about an added layer to it. And this goes for PvP as well. I can imagine me enjoying PvP if it's not just me against somebody else or a group against another group. It's where we go to charge and all of a sudden now this cloud of dust comes along and now starts affecting us and changes the dynamic of the approach for the attack, and it can be one of those surprising elements that evens everything out. And I can see that being interesting as well, where I would love to go and see and try out some PvP and see how that all works. So yeah, the environment's going to be a big one. How much layering they're going to put into it, and how it's going to affect us as players.
Right. And what if you knew that toxic environment, like you knew why it was toxic, right? You knew that it was because of this, whatever the lore supporting it is. I mean, and some people I find, some people the lore is really important, and some people it's just not important at all. And I can see that both sides. It's more of just a mechanics thing. But for me, I want to know, like, that toxic environment. Is it because there's some sort of, what's the story there?
Yeah.
So I guess that's why I usually play really evil characters. The only lore I gotta know is that I hate everybody. And I can get behind that.
You don't have to do much then, do you?
Exactly.
It comes natural.
It does.
Fair enough.
So, of all the lore that we have for each individual race, I'm curious, so far, what is your favorite one and why?
I go back to the gnomes again, and there's a little bit of a cliche with their lore in terms of what happened to them on their home planet, and the whole delve too deep sort of idea, right? They were burrowing down into their planet. They found they were corrupted by the Elos fire, I think is what it's called, and how it sort of changed them from these physical beings into these beings of pure energy, and then basically led to their planet I might be misremembering, but I think that's what happened. Basically, their planet sort of fell apart, and they came to Terminus as a result. And then, you know, they're sort of isolated, right? They're isolated in this floating citadel of, and they don't. I think they were one of the last races to arrive as well on Terminus. So, I think that the idea that they're sort of a newer race to Terminus and sort of still young on the planet is interesting. But I like their lore.
Nice.
Yeah.
So of the released signature characters, which one do you like the most?
I'm gonna go with Thalen Greyborn. She's pretty badass. She's also close to a type of a character that I would want to play. She's got a lot of interesting sort of features. One of them being how she sort of starts on one path as one class and then becomes this other class, right?
Yeah.
She starts life as a rogue, and then she goes off and, you know, has adventures or does whatever she does. She comes back injured. She realizes that, you know, for her to accomplish what she wants to accomplish in life, she has to change her class and becomes a fighter. And it's pretty explicitly stated in her story. I actually went back. There's actually an old newsletter that has a earlier story involving her. And I didn't realize that. The November 2018 newsletter, I went back and read it the other day. It's got her sort of just sort of a small adventure of what she was doing when she was out as a rogue. But it does a good job of telling the story of how she's like seeing her life goals in her head, and she's having this sort of imagined conversation with her father, and he's saying, you know, she's asking, can I do all these things as a rogue? And he's saying, no, you can't do them as a rogue, but you can do them as you, right? So she's not constrained to this one class. So I really like that sort of idea. So I think she's a well-developed character.
I just had a really cool idea for VR and for the community as well. You know how we've all seen these links and these sites that, you know, talk about movies and the characters and everything. Which Game of Thrones character are you, or, you know, connected to and everything. Imagine VR doing that with the signature races, like, you know, putting out certain questions you ask, and depending on your answer, you know, you get told that you're, you know, this signature class, or you're related or close to this signature class, and the same goes with the races. It would be pretty cool to have something like that. So, you know, to kind of just mess about with, you know, what race are you related to or connected to the most, and based on your questions or based on the questions and answers you give, you might find some surprises that, hey, you know, I hate the Scar, but by the looks of it, you know, hey, the Scar's a choice for me. That'd be pretty cool to see.
That would be cool. I like that idea. Guild Wars 2 does a sort of similar thing to that at the very beginning of
personality test.
Yes, the personality test at the beginning. It sort of aligns you with a certain faction of your chosen race.
Yeah.
I don't like those things. They always bug out and tell me I'm a horrible person.
Well, you know, hey, at least they're true.
So I don't like them.
So much the game. I'm not sure. Their problem might be somewhere else.
Yeah, so Lex is the type of person who's like, you know, I'm a horrible person, but I don't like being told I'm a horrible person. I already know I'm a horrible person. I don't need to hear it from anybody else.
I already know it. You don't need to rub it in my damn face.
Yeah, exactly. Something I can't change.
No.
Right, so everybody loves mechanics in the game. It's one of the most important things. That obviously makes or breaks games as well. So what game mechanics have you excited and why? Things like perception, weather, climatization, and climate, etc. are very important things.
I think it's the perception system for me. You know, whenever you play another RPG where you have, like, you know, at the beginning of the game, you can dump points into certain categories. You've got strength, whatever, wisdom, blah, 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 blah. You know, for some reason, perception always gets a lot of points for me. I sort of think of it as like, you know, being able to see the hidden patterns, or maybe being able to sort of observe those minute details and the secret paths of the world. So I feel like the perception system, that the way they've talked about it in Pantheon, is very much like that. It's going to give you that sort of meta layer of vision of things, to see things that not everybody else is going to be able to see. And I think they've talked about, you know, like your character will be a watcher. You know, if you choose to go down that path, you can take that sort of archetype.
Become a keeper,
Yeah, or keep.
I was going to say they're going to watch her, and they better get a restraining order. I'm suing.
And the thing is as well, with what you said, if they can add a dynamic into the perception system that maybe certain quests only open up after you've gained a certain investigation skill, or what's the other dynamic? I can't remember what the other one was. Investigation and
there's two of them.
Yeah,
investigation.
But but the perception system itself, though, if we look at it, it can branch out into all of these mechanics that they've got: the weather, acclimation, climate, crafting. You name it. It can be tied into all of that. It can be tied into the environment as well, where there might be a rock outside in the wilderness, and it's got some cryptic images, at least for you right now. And you now go and learn some foreign tongue, and all of a sudden, because you've learned that foreign tongue, you've ran past this rock 100 times, thousands of times. You've passed it, and you're like almost max level, as an example. And now you've learned this foreign tongue, and you stumble upon this rock again, and all of a sudden perception kicks in. You're like, what the hell? What happened? And now you go and investigate this rock, and now you can start reading this message, and it now opens up a whole new world for you to explore. Things like that. It's so
you learn the ancient language. You see it all it says is Yarn is here. Next thing you do in OSC is type, damn you, Yarn!
Yeah, it's really interesting the way that they've talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's for a ranger, it's a sort of a natural fit to be skilled in something like that. So I'm really definitely going to be following that. And I'll give a quick shout out to the disposition system. I think is really cool too. The way that they've talked about different mobs will have dispositions, randomly or whatever doing it.
Mentioning the ranger as well. Like I could see the ranger having a slight advantage in the investigation perception. Because he can track, he can read, and identify things out in the world. So he might have an environmental advantage with perception, whereas all the other class might not. So it's things like that where you can add that to the races as well. It's like inside dark dungeons, for instance, I could see the dwarves having a better perception because they've learnt to live in these dark, dull, mountainsides and things like that. So there's a lot of ways for them to just bring it in there, and also touch on the racial aspect of it as well. And I can't wait to see it in its full flesh. And it's something that can always be grown over time. This is a cool mechanic for them to bring something exciting for us. Bring it even more further for us to engage with. EverQuest is a prime example of the rumors of things out in the world that might not have been there. It's just rumored. It's been foretold that there's this sword out there, and we've all heard these stories. If they're true or not, that there's certain items that you get reveal some cryptic messages, and add that now to the perception of finding stuff out and then going on a treasure hunt. Brilliant. And an amazing time sink as well.
Yeah, it's a neat system the way they described it. I'm really excited for it too.
So with Pantheon having an environment basically being thrown into the whole dynamics of the player's experience, altering essentially the way that you interact with a lot of portions of the game, I'm curious if you think this is something that has been missing from your more modern MMOs.
Well, I would say yes and no. So some MMOs sort of use this idea, but they do it in such an arcade style way, such a reflex, or so you're dodging or you're avoiding highlighted parts of the ground. If you're talking about and I know that the definition of what environmental is sort of different in that instance, but the way I think the idea is a good idea, but I think the way it's been implemented is pretty bad in a lot of ways. It's gotten to the point of reflexes, quick twitch sort of reactions to things. So when it comes to environmental dynamics in that sense, I'm not in favor of it. What I want is more of a strategic or a tactical sort of approach where you have to take into account environmental dynamics in the planning or the preparation phase when you're with a group or with you're going into a big, like raid situation or whatever it is, where you require, there's forethought has to go into it. So I like the way that they've talked about it in Pantheon. I think that I think it requires you to make some choices with whether it's gear or protections, spell protections, and so forth. You have to say, so I'm not going to survive this situation if I don't have a certain amount of acclimation to this environmental sort of whether it's toxic or ice or whatever it is. But I also need to keep my DPS at a certain rate, so I can't. You have to make choices and balance things. So I'm more into the environmental design requiring that kind of an approach as opposed to a quick twitch reflex.
Yeah, kind of all about that balance, huh?
Yeah,
it's got to be a balance.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of decision. Well, I shouldn't say a fan because sometimes they're just downright annoying. But I have a great appreciation for moments where I have to decide if a benefit outweighs the negative. Because it makes me think. I'm not just sitting here blindly hitting buttons, It's kind of like why I stopped watching TV. I don't think when I watch TV. So I just sit there kind of drooling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And modern MMOs make me feel the same way. There's very little to actually think about.
Now I've got an image of Mr. Potato in my head when Nex is watching television.
Kind of what I feel like.
There's a lot of dumb stuff out there.
Anybody out there in chat, can somebody draw Lexa as Mr. Potato, please? Please.
All you gotta do is make a circle, then 2 circles for eyes. Give it a beard. Give it furrowed eyebrows. And
you're all good.
A t-shirt that says Scar. Done.
And a pop-off nose.
That's right.
Please, somebody do that.
Well, let's move on to some crafting here.
Sure.
What purpose do you think crafting really should serve in an MMO? And more specifically, what kind of purpose should it have in Pantheon?
Well, so crafting for me is always the role it's played when I play an MMO is it's what I do when I don't feel like grouping, or if I'm feeling sort of antisocial that day, if I'm not in the most talkative whatever place, that's what I'll do, and that's fine. And it's not a huge role for me in terms of how I take it in an MMO, but I know that for other people it's huge, and it's a big part of the game. So I don't want to minimize it in Pantheon just because it's not important to me. I think that I think it needs to be a big part of Pantheon is, and it's one of those areas that I actually haven't invested a lot of time into learning the crafting systems of Pantheon, because I just feel like there's so much there, and I feel like it's my engagement with it will be limited. So I'll be a crafter. I'll do some crafting, but it's not going to be something I spend a ton of time with.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's basically kind of like when I'm bored, it's something to keep me busy until someone interesting comes around.
Yeah.
I mean that's kind of, you're kind of speaking my language here. It's what I do.
It's like a mid-work project,
Yeah, it's like it'll keep my attention for the 5 or 10 minutes that it takes for something interesting to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I respect crafting as a greater thing.
I respect it in the terms of that I want crafters to get.
Yeah.
I've always felt bad for, because I know a couple of people who really love crafting.
Lives matter, right?
No,
Exactly.
not in any other game, that's for sure. But with that being said, I'm curious, what kind of profession do you think you would pick?
So I usually take woodcraft, and it's purely
arrows.
Yep. So I can make my own stuff, right? So I can make my bows, I can make my arrows.
So no jokes about playing with wood.
Yeah.
when I can get the wood up and I can do it, and it's. But yeah, no.
What you can't tell me that you don't like playing with toys that are made of wood. See how he's always making me the bad guy, people.
Yeah.
Because you are the bad guy. You've admitted it yourself.
The shoe fits.
Just if the shoe fits, it means that I wear shoes.
So I did like in Vanguard the big epic crafting. I have to say, one of my favorite parts of Vanguard was making a boat. I loved my boat, and I worked on it a lot, and I was proud when it was done. So I hope Pantheon has big projects like that. So yeah.
So
that'd be amazing.
Yeah. Let's have a look at trade skills in general. There's a big and harvesting with this next question. Now, this is a big debate because some games do it completely the opposite. When it comes to acquiring a trade skill, should one be able to only learn one, or should the player be able to obtain all professions over time? And the same goes with harvesting. Should you be only able to harvest rock if you choose that, become a miner, or should it be more generalized that you can basically do a bit of everything? What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I sort of think everything should be available, but I also don't think that you should be as proficient in everything. So what I would sort of propose, or the idea I would have, is that you pick your primary trade skill or harvesting, and then for every second or for every next one that you pick, it becomes a little more difficult to progress in that one, right? So if I start as a woodworker and then I get to where I want to be in that, and then I take on leatherworking, I don't level up as quickly in that skill or advance in that skill as quickly. And then if I take another one, it gets a little bit harder still. So, but I do think they should all be available. I don't like limits on things necessarily. I just think that they shouldn't be easy for everyone. We talked about on one of the other shows sort of about should all races be able to play all classes, which is a similar question. And my opinion was the same thing. Like, yes, I want to make weird classes, like I want to make scar bards and I want to make weird combinations of things. So when it comes to like harvesting and trade skills, I think I'd like to be sort of I like them all available.
I really like what you just said though as well. The approach that you had, like basically going from, once you've reached a certain point in woodworking that you're happy with, right, you move on to the next one. This actually sparks an idea, maybe something to discuss, and maybe if Nefo's listening or catches us at some point, maybe this is something to look at, right? We look at crafting's no different than adventuring. You every 10 levels or every 15 or whatever, it's rinse and repeat of your recipes, right? You can make bigger bags, you can make bigger this, you can make the next tier of weaponry and everything. What if rather than going that approach, you could end up creating bags at say level 20 and boxes and whatever, just as a prime example here. And now you move over to the next crafting profession because you that's what you're happy with, that's what you want to do. So rather than it repeating itself every so many levels, it's spread out. So if you want to learn how to design spears or breastplates, chainmail, or breastplates, heavy mail and everything, it's broken down into. That would be broken down into levels. So you would craft till you get to that certain point of being able to do that, rather than doing it every 10 levels you get to the next tier. So don't break the stuff down into tiers itself and have it rinse and repeat. You just break down the basics. So I could be a level 10 tailor. I can make bags. I can make bags that will be available for level 50 people. Or, I have bigger slots because I've learned that. I've unlocked that. You kind of advance it that way as well.
I would take it a step further. If you are a specialist tailor making bags, and you choose a tailor as a specialist class, and you don't choose anything else, maybe you can have different extra things where the bag is can hold 50% more items compared to just an average tailor that's just making bags as well, and that type of thing. So they can have their own skill sets.
That's also a cool idea in general, Josh. Look at it from this perspective. You go through the steps of unlocking these individual items that you can do. Spears, swords, shields, this, that, and the other. You now reach shields because you want to do shields. You now click that as your specialization. Boom, that's it. You're the guy to go to when it comes to shields. Now Lexer carries on because he wants to go and do two-handed axes. He reaches two-handed axes, specializes in that. Now he's the guy who, it kind of basically it's.
You need a head chopped off. I'm your guy.
It's one of those things where not everybody's kind of like the same. You're going to have people out there doing certain things. You're going to have a lot of people that are specialized in doing, two-handed axes. You got people that specialize in doing bags, specialize in doing this, and that kind of adds an additional value to the items as well, I would think, and to the crafting process.
Yeah, those are good ideas. I like that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So, moving on to design. What do you think of locked areas in the game that can only be opened through some type of key? Is this something that is beneficial to the game or a hindrance in the long run?
I think that there should definitely be different requirements for your character or your group to be able to access certain areas. I like the idea of keying through. It adds challenge. It creates obstacles. Ultra rare items that need to be accessed, that are needed to access, like a really high level area, or even like a low level area. It doesn't matter. They add a rarity to that experience because there will be something that needs to be an obstacle that needs to be overcome to get to that area. So I know some people don't like the idea of like content being gated or being sort of blocked off, but and there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. But to me, that's really all about, right? Like at the core, all games are basically just self-imposed obstacles that we set up for ourselves to be conquered, right? Like that's what it's all about. So when you have places that are behind a wall of some sort of content, a challenge, I'm fine with that, especially in a PvE game, right? And it just adds so much. Like it adds like some areas are very like Vishen's Peak in EverQuest. I don't know if you remember that, but like hard area to get to and a hard thing to do. And people loved it. I'm sure some people didn't, but most people I think loved that idea that, what, I got here, I went through this rigmarole, this whole challenge set to get to this place. And that's the reward is the journey to achieve it, right? Not the achievement per se.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you say. The journey is the reward at the end of the day. People have so many things, and those are the memories are made out of.
Yep, exactly. That does.
Like in real life, it's about the miles you do.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The trip.
I'm not even going to make a joke about that because I'm lazy. My miles are as low as I can get them. Now, I'm kind of curious here. Do you think that the dispositions and behaviors of NPCs, will that enhance the player experience, or do you think it might end up becoming a hindrance?
No, I think it's really good. It's a great idea. I mentioned it earlier. So I don't know if you guys have played like the Lord of the Rings games, right? The Shadow of War games. And I know that the VR team drew some inspiration from those games, and when they've talked about disposition systems, they're really fun. I like them. I think they add dynamic layers to the game. So every time you think you have a good strategy for something, you need to adapt. It changes, and you have to adapt. There's a ton of room to create really interesting encounters and situations. There's going to be weird situations too. Like I think the disposition system that they've talked about adds there's risk involved in the way that it can play out in the game world. There's going to be mobs that will have a certain disposition available to them, and it's going to be totally unfair. It's going to be really stupid. Something bad will happen. They'll have to sort of be on top of it, I think, and adjust because. But in sort of theory, in the way that they've discussed it, I think it's really good. It keeps camps from getting static, from just sitting there and we know what's coming. Now we have to adjust for a possible random disposition that the mob might have.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good system in my opinion.
Like super tough mobs, or if they've got more resistance for some reason. All these type of things. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I have to ask: are you currently in a guild at this point?
Yep. I'm a member of Sanctuary. Which is sort of a guild of storytelling RP a little bit. It's an RP approach to the game. I've never been actually a big role player, but with the sort of approach I want to take to Pantheon is to really focus on the quality over the quantity, and take it slow. And I think this it's a good guild that fits for me. So it embraces the lore. We've talked about that, yeah, it's a small, medium-sized guild. It's not even, I'd say it's a small guild, and for me, that's my style as well. I don't like huge guilds where I'm just a number, right, or just a number in a raid, a body for a raid. For me, I'm enjoy having the
17. You're up.
Talking to people, having regular conversations with them. So yeah. So I'm a member of Sanctuary, and I'm very happy to be with them.
Okay, good. Excellent. So Pantheon will have a subscription pay model. Do you think that it's the right way to go, and why?
I do. I think it's the best. One of the best features about Pantheon is that the way they've described their pure sub model and the payment. It's also one of the biggest not concerns, but one of the ways that I think Pantheon could go sideways the most. To be honest, I don't know if anybody's ever made a pure subscription model before. Early WoW made a pure subscription model financially, and I'm not an expert, but it seems to me like it's such a slippery slope these days. The games start out with sub models, pure sub models, and then they slip. They see that, they hear the call of that, the cash shop. They hear the premium subscription, all that nonsense, right? And I'm done with all that stuff. That's going to be one of those hard lines for me if that starts happening. But I'm trying to sort of, mute that pessimistic voice to try and stay, nope, they're not going to do that. They're going to stick to the pure sub model. I kind of actually hope, they haven't settled on a price of what the sub model is. I kind of hope maybe that they increase it a little bit to prevent that from happening. Because they said, I think they've said $15-20 a month or whatever. But if they went up from that, I wouldn't necessarily freak out, because I think that could help make it financially viable down the road, like going forward long term. So I started with Elder Scrolls Online, and it was a pure sub model at the beginning too, and then they got bad reviews and things happened, and they went to the what they are now, right?
Yeah, EQ2 was $14.99 or $15 right?
Yeah, when like a lot of so EQ2 I think was pure as well at the beginning, but then like all the MMOs, they've all sort of, none of them can stick with it, right? None of them can stay the course with the pure sub model. They all hear that call.
Going free to play is easier than fixing the problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that, I just made a lot of enemies in the gaming industry.
And the thing is though, right? You're getting paid a monthly fee. Shouldn't that actually motivate you to go and fix these issues? You're getting paid for it. No, you just rather carry on with a broken game. We'll just go free to play, so we don't have to deal with this rubbish. It's an insult.
I will add to this though. Even if the sub were to increase, if the quality and the enjoyment is there, would an extra $5 really matter?
Yeah,
it's because
exactly
they're providing a service, right? They've got a service to maintain. They've got developers constantly working on the game. They've got an administrative IT team constantly working on the issues within the game. The coders are constantly trying to fix, bugs and everything. So it's not something that, here we go. This is Pantheon. Off you go and play it, and that's it. They're done. They sit back and just enjoy themselves. No, they're working 24/7, constantly on this game. The servers have to be maintained, mouths have to be fed, so we should pay for this service. It doesn't work any other way. Thinking getting something for free and it's going to be good it doesn't work like that. I'm sorry.
It's insane. I mean, that's what the landscape is right now. It's a lot of, you get what you pay for, right? You pay nothing, you get nothing, but not, I don't know, you get nothing out of it. So
you pay nothing, you get nothing worth playing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Go out on the
weekend.
weekend.
Long-term viable is the question.
Go out on the weekend. Go out with your girlfriend, your wife, whatever. Go out on the weekend to a bar, have a meal, go play some pool or whatever, watch a movie. Easily $100 and more spent on just one evening out. And you're spending like 10, 15, $20 a month or whatever for a game that you can access every day for multiple hours, how long ever you want.
Yeah,
You know, what greater entertainment level are you going to get?
Well, I say to people when they say, I'm not going to pay anything for this, I say, well, would you like to go to your job and not be paid for anything, for not doing anything?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Week in, week out. So why not put a little bit of money towards the guys that are making an entertaining system for you?
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. Yeah.
Good
example,
tired of
actually.
games that are, I'm just tired of games that are trying to sell me things in the game, whether it's cash shops or whatever, or just extra stuff. I don't want that. Like, I want to pay my monthly sub and be done.
And here's kind of a side question though. Isn't that kind of the culture that we live in now?
Yep. Yeah, it is. It is.
I mean,
I know.
it's at the point where I'm actually sick of browsing the internet because I have to have like 3 ad blocks and a domain blocker just to go somewhere without being like, buy our brand new shiny whatchamajig that you have no need for, but you searched for something 3 weeks ago that had half of this in the name. You might want it.
Yeah. I just think that, video games are they need to be sort of stepped out of that whole idea, right? And like when I play Pillars of Eternity, there's no advertising popping up in the game. There's no like, hey, you can buy this for $5 US. Like I don't know. I hate that when that sort of bleeds into the game, and I think a pure sub model is the only way to prevent that. I just hope that they can figure it out, right? I hope that they can solve the riddle of how to make it viable.
I mean,
it's not easy to solve. I'm going to be the first one to admit that it's not an easy problem to solve, especially when you look at like operating costs for a business, and then everything that's accompanied with that takes money.
Yep.
And when you start making money, let's face it, if you were on this side earning money, you're always going to be like, well, more is always better.
Right. Let's go and have a look at this. Let's go and have a look at this one now. Right. Let's take a single player game for example. Let's go and take Red Dead Redemption 2 that's coming out soon. Now let's say they started to do it like you buy the game, and now for extra $10 you can you have to pay $10 to advance to the next main storyline of the main game. Right? Imagine single player games doing that. There'd be a major uproar if you have to pay to unlock the content further. So you get the base game to a certain point, but the rest has to be paid for time and again.
Yeah, it's craziness. I know, and nobody would accept that.
Exactly.
So, and there's even MMOs out there where you pay to skip the content, right? Like, I think it's one of the Final Fantasy games. You can pay to skip through all this stuff. Like, what are we doing?
What's the use? Yeah, what's the use?
What is the point of that? I don't get it, but
I think people forget that you play a game to go in and then be immersed in it. You're already pulled up by ads. You're already pulled up by skipping things, or this or that, and the next thing. It's just lost its meaning.
Yeah, it's gotten pretty polluted. I agree.
Yeah. On to something better. I'm going to change this question a little bit. So hold on to your pooper. If you could sit down and have lunch with one person from VR, who would it be? Where would you go? And would you pay the bill?
Oh my god. Well, I think probably everybody was.
Damn right I wouldn't. I'd be like, sorry, I gotta go to the bathroom. Be right back.
I would tell them I'll pay the bill if you'll institute this one thing that I really, really want. I would make a condition.
Fair enough.
I'm gonna hold your lunch ransom.
That's right. You're not getting out of this restaurant until you say there's never going to be a cash shop. No, I would, and I think most people would say Brad McQuaid, so I'm not going to take the easy answer. I'm going to say Justin Gerhardt, who's the lead writer, right? The lore guy.
Hell yeah.
I would love to talk to that guy and find out, how he sort of comes up with his ideas, how he develops his lore, what he's inspired by, what his sort of, what his roots are of creative writing, and how he implements the mechanics into the stories that he writes.
We actually got most of those questions answered, buddy, in our interview that we did with him and Jopper. I think it was Jopper, right? Josh, Jopper and Justin Gerhardt, right?
If you think I can remember that far back, you don't know me at all.
Right, so we actually did an interview with him, and some of those questions got answered actually. So you might want to go and look back at that. And
I will. Then definitely go back and watch that. So, yeah, that's what I do.
Shameless self-promotion.
Yeah.
Flag.
Gotta do it. Yeah. So I don't know. We'd go for coffee somewhere. We'd go to grab a Starbucks or whatever. Tim Hortons here. So.
Yeah, Timmy's.
Timmy's. Gotta have my Timmy's.
God, I miss Timmy's.
Yeah, I know. So good.
No one in America understands it when I say I miss my extra large triple.
Oh yeah, it's the medium double for me. So
I know.
Medium, yeah. Oh, of course you do. Yes.
But they have Timmy's in the States, I think. So
I've only seen one, and I walked up and I asked for a medium double, and the girl looked at me like I had no face.
What? Really? You need to go somewhere else then. That's.
I was just like, I actually walked outside, looked at us, I said, "Yep, that says Tim Hortons." Oh God, yeah, that's one of the. For those in the States who don't understand that it's like the heart of Canada is in a little coffee and donut shop called Tim Hortons that is literally almost on every corner of every town in 100%. Every province.
There's no small town in Canada that does not have a Tim Hortons. And
It's kind of like the Canadian version of Starbucks.
Yeah.
But with donuts and good coffee.
That's right, better coffee.
Yeah. And coffee that you don't need a thesaurus to understand what the hell it is.
You don't feel like a hipster.
Right. So next one here.
Starbucks coffees, man. Is that with latte, soy milk, low fat? Just make me a damn coffee.
Oh no, I got a story for you. I actually went to a Starbucks because someone told me they make great coffee. Now, I drink my coffee black with a little bit of sugar sometimes if I'm feeling crazy. And I actually ordered black coffee. And the person said, "What else?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Coffee. Black. Please."
There was a dead silence in Starbucks.
Yeah, it's like, what the hell is that?
And there was probably a 60-year-old couple behind me who were arguing over who was going to get some low-fat something chai latte and who was going to get the something. And I'm like, I want to shoot myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can I just have a coffee, please?
Right.
Exactly.
Give me my goddamn black coffee. But we can't make it like that. Why not? Because we have to put something in it.
Yeah. Or there's no small, medium, large. It's all these weird,
Put my hopes and dreams in it. There, you happy? Go on. So, next question.
Okay.
Should expansions always raise the level cap and have new content?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer to this one is because I'm not a game developer, and it's one of those questions that I would probably see on the forums and I just wouldn't answer because it's hard to say. I don't know if I think that content is the easier one. Definitely, I think there should be content expansion, but the level cap, I don't know. Not necessarily. I mean, you can add other things to do. You can add other aspects to the game. So what if an expansion just added, a new race? And like with Pantheon, they've got this sort of setup to bring other races down later. Other collisions can happen. So I don't know if they necessarily need to raise the level cap. It depends on what the pacing is too, like how long it takes. If it's really slow, like the way that they talk about, not necessarily. So, it's one of the questions. I'm not 100% sure.
Cool.
No, I kind of agree with that. For me, it's always been if you're going, it depends on the speed of the expansion.
Yeah.
If it's going to be a year and a half for an expansion, we should probably get some new levels because for a year and a half, we've been dealing with the same, we'll just say gameplay mechanic, in terms of abilities and whatnot. But if it's coming out in 6 months, I think it's safe to say you don't really need to expand the level range.
Yeah.
Just give us something to do.
Yeah, I think some people are very, attached to leveling being the way forward. That's the only, it's a one-way street.
That's my story. Ding, 24.
Yeah. I mean, I like the slow sort of idea. So I don't know, but yeah, levels maybe, but content probably yes.
Okay. So, what forms of travel would you like to see, and what forms of travel would you not like to see in Pantheon?
And I think anything that requires interdependence amongst players, right? So ports from wizards and druids, speed buffs, back in the good days of EverQuest with Spirit of the Wolf and all that stuff. Even something like, an idea that occurred to me was with summoners. We don't know a lot about summoners yet, but what if they could summon temporary mounts or flying creatures, right? I know that I'm not a big fan of the flying and things that shrink the world. I think a lot of
let's say hovering mounts.
Yeah, hovering is good.
Sure. I have no problem with things like that, but I don't want any sort of like
shrink world
open
stuff.
a map, pick a point, fast travel type stuff. That's not. I think it needs to be leveraged to increase class identity and value. So if I'm a druid, and I've discovered the way that like the port stone that they've talked about, I want that should be valuable to me, and I should have value to my other players, or to other players of the game that come to me and say, hey, can you help me out and port me here? And sure, no problem. Or if I can do something else to sort of do that. I don't want the map just to become this, clicky, fast travel stuff that keep the world big has been sort of the sentiment, I think. I think in the community that's sort of been the sentiment as well. We're sort of tired of fast travel.
Yeah.
Cool.
Nice.
So I think we're getting close to the wrap up here.
Well, we are getting close to it, yeah.
Yeah, so the last question I'll ask you, because I've been talking a lot. Thanks, Yarn. Given the chance, would you actually attend a Pantheon? A Pantheon only convention? And how far would you travel to attend?
Yeah, I'd love to go. I was talking about playing Hearthstone a lot earlier, and we used to do in Winnipeg. We've done fireside gatherings, which are like Blizzard sanctioned, meetups with the local fans. They're so much fun. As long as there's beer involved, I'm there. And really distance. It's funny because my wife and I went to Munich in the spring of this year. Yeah, so we were like over area there. Yeah, and then they had that meetup in Cologne, right? There's a few months later, I missed it by like a couple months. I was like, oh, I would have loved to have gone to something like that. So yeah,
that would have been cool, buddy.
Yeah, I would have been there, man. I would have been there, but we just missed
so
it.
Next time you're in Europe, you're in somewhere in the UK or you're in Germany or whatever, anywhere. Hit me up or Josh up,
I will. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no. So those are always fun. I mean, those are good times, right?
Oh,
yeah, definitely.
Drinking and talking about the game.
Yep, and spilling beer over brass.
You have good beer in Germany, but
it was very awkward when he tried to get the beer back.
Yeah, exactly.
We will not talk about that. Okay, that's between me and brass
and your wife.
So fast forward 3 years from right now, where do you see Pantheon being evolved into?
Well, without a launch date, it's hard to see. We don't know when it's coming out, so it's hard to sort of see it. Hopefully we're playing it by then. I think that's one thing we can all agree on. 3 years seems like a reasonable time frame for it to be out by then. I think that every MMO sees that initial spike and lots of people playing it, but if we're looking at 3 years down the road, probably that's already gone past and we're sort of leveled out to that core group. And I think they'll have a steady population, and I hope that it's thriving. I hope that the community has embraced it, and I hope that it's sort of been bold enough to make a mark in the MMO landscape. That's what I want to see in 3 years.
Awesome.
Brilliant. So, I know that you travelled recently to Edinburgh, and you thought it was the best place on earth. Who is the VoT host with the most?
That's the toughest question. I don't know. You guys are awesome. Great show. So if in life, I sort of think less is more sometimes, and the strong, silent sort of approach is sort of how I like to think of myself. So, Josh,
well, I'm out of the running.
Yeah, so am I.
Everybody has their own strengths, and you guys are all great. But Josh, you're sort of the strong, silent type. I don't know. I'll give it to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Everybody's gotta get one.
Exactly. I'm gonna have a win once in a while. Thank you.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So awesome to sit down with you, Therek.
Yeah.
Really happy that you
Thanks, guys.
that we got connected, and you were willing to come on and chat with us. We'll definitely hook up again in the future. If there's any topic that you want to discuss or anything like that, and theorize and break it apart, hit us up and we'll get together, work something out.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
great conversation. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, 2 hours has flown by. It's been great.
Yep.
I know.
That's what I love doing these, because it's so good to meet everybody and get their views and opinions on certain areas. That's why we ask some of we try and ask some of the tougher questions that are out there to see how everybody feels, because it validates everything.
Yeah, I could have talked for an hour on each question. They were great questions. There's so much there that I could have talked, so I just sort of tried to keep it in check a little bit.
A lot of people like to poke fun at the fact that our shows can go very, very long.
Yeah.
But this is why, when you get, I mean, you could do a show for 2 hours if it's just one person talking about something they're passionate about. Let's get 4 people together.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or 5, or 12.
Recipe for disaster.
5, it's just it's going to take forever. I mean, it's amazing that we can keep it under 2 hours.
Yeah. So that concludes the interview, everybody. If anybody in chat ever wants to sit down with us and talk Pantheon and everything, hit us up. Join our Discord and hit us up. Reach out to us. We'll gladly set up a date. It's every Saturday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Obviously, there's going to be a time shift coming soon. So I can't remember what we decided to do, if we go an hour later or an hour early. I can't remember what it was, but we will inform you. But it's regularly, it's 6 p.m. Eastern Time when we do our show on a Saturday. If you're available, you're willing to come on, let us know so we can plan and pick a date. We like to plan these ahead, way in time, so that we have enough room to prepare for these. You get the questions in advance. You're not going to be sitting there unless Lexa goes on a wild rampage on Twitter and just goes, "Hey, guess what? You're coming on the show."
I've only done that once.
But the thing is, but we'll have to do that again though at some point.
I know that was good.
It was cool. But anyway,
that was good fun.
A reminder of what's happening next week. VR will be streaming on the 23rd at 6 p.m. PDT with their new formatted version of the newsletter. It will be bi-weekly as well. The newsletter itself, the normal newsletter, will still carry on, so the hard print will still be there, but then they're unclear on how and when they want to release it. It's going to be obviously a lot more compact, but is it going to be something that they release shortly after they do the stream? Or is it something that they basically gather every month, so they have just one newsletter? Something that they're still debating, but it will be in a short. There will be a hard print to follow the streams for those that don't necessarily want to watch a video and everything. So that's coming up on Wednesday, and then following that on Thursday, Pantheon Plus. Minus will be joined by Micah Does Stuff to talk about the newsletter in its new format and break it down, have a look what they liked and how it was perceived, etc. So
wait, did you just say Micah's coming back on the show?
On Pantheon Plus, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if it's on our show, I like that guy. He only lives 2 hours from me. I gotta go down there and get some cookies.
Yeah, go for it, buddy. So those are the things we look forward to next week, and have a great weekend, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great weekend.
Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Well, don't do anything I would do.